Welcome everyone to another Wednesday night to Fundamentals to Gain Inner Peace with your host, Coach Menachem. Tonight we're doing class number 89, and all the recordings are available on menachembernfeld.com. And feedback, questions are always welcome. You can sign up to get emails. You can send it to coachmenachem@gmail.com. And let me know you want to get the emails, and we'll add you to the list. And you'll get all the updates. So I want to thank you all for joining tonight. And if it's the first time you're here, then welcome. And again, to be part of this, you might want to listen to some recordings to see where we're coming from, but we'll try to keep it simple. A lot of the things we've discussed, we're going to be talking about Elul tonight, and a lot of information we've discussed. Maybe we didn't say the word Elul, but talking about those feelings that come up and how to deal with it, what it means not to get lost. So here we are. So let's get started with our tonight's sponsor, okclarity.com. OK Clarity is a place to find top-notch therapists, coach, or nutritionists. Their professionals are vetted and have extensive experience working with the Jewish community. If you're in the market, you're looking for a therapist, a coach, or the like, you can always look okclarity.com and join their WhatsApp status. The number is 917-426-1495. That's 917-426-1495. Okay, so let's get grounded. Let's see where we are before we start. Make yourself comfortable, take a deep breath, and just become aware of where you are and where you're coming from. What brings you here tonight, how you got here, was it the last minute? Maybe you're relaxed, take it easy. You have learned how to take some time off. Or maybe you're still running and stressed out and you feel it in your bones. But for now, in the moment, now that you're here, try to be in the moment, try to be here. And all you're doing is listening to my voice. Become aware of your surroundings. And then we turn inwards to see how we feel. What does our body feel? And whatever it is, might be tingling, might be pressure in the head, in the jaws, in your shoulders. Just becoming aware, being in the moment, that itself helps us to relax. You become aware of what's going on. Okay, so last week, we went through many questions, thought-provoking questions. If you sit with the questions for a little bit, things come up. Questions to help us realize how we accept ourselves, the way we look at ourselves. And if you didn't listen to it, you can listen to the recording, and the recording might be better because you can pause. If you need some time, something, just when you ask yourself a question, nothing comes up, just sit with it, and then different thoughts come up. What does it mean? Maybe this, maybe that, and you start writing it down. And then when you're ready, you go to the next question. And slowly we become aware of how we accept ourselves. And we ask the question just to imagine that we don't have to hide anymore. Imagine I can just be who I am. I don't have to please others. And yes, I am growing. I'm not perfect yet, but we're not looking for perfect, and we're all growing. We all have, things we can get better at, but, to see the positives. If we won't have to hide, you don't have to put on a mask, and just be. What would that feel like? What would you do? What would you do different if you wouldn't have to pretend. You can just, you have ideas, you want to do something, you go and you start, even though it doesn't work the first time. But we mentioned you need to have a little bit of compassion, understanding that we're not perfect, not to be harsh on ourselves, which on this journey, many people realize the second they start thinking about themselves, all they find is negativity. And I'm not good at anything. There's nothing that I can do. I've heard this many times from many people, and all I have to challenge them. Say that again, nothing. And it's hard. It does take time. So you tell them, write down two simple things, ask somebody, just to realize that it's not nothing. Maybe it's not everything. I would say you could sing, you can write. Singing is a good example. I'm not sure if we discussed it. Everyone knows how to sing. Now let's see what comes up. What ideas come up in your head when I say that? Everyone knows how to sing. A little baby, all they do is sing. Before somebody makes faces and says, you have your voice sounds ugly. Little kids, they sing. Now what happens is we get some ideas in our head, but that's a good example. You know how to sing. Yes, you do. So if you would be the only one around and you would sing, there was nobody better. You wouldn't have these ideas of beautiful singing, better singers. You'd be fine. But now that you have in your head different, for me it's hard, I can't. And you picked up ideas maybe when you were younger, somebody said something, it was embarrassing, somebody looked. And that's that. Now we're walking around with some ideas about ourselves and say, I can't sing. You can say that with running, you can say that with writing, with art. We're all artists. Take a brush and start painting. What's it gonna be? Nothing is gonna come out. Try, let's see. It's just there's the idea that again, we could grow, there's room for growth, but don't walk around saying, I don't know how to cook, I don't know how to sing, I don't know how to draw, I don't know how to write, I don't know how to talk. You're walking around with zero, empty bank accounts. So that's important awareness. Start writing down the things you could do, even if it's 10%, 5%, a little bit. Once in a while you could do it, write it down. Walk around with it, feel good about it, feel good about yourself. And eventually, after we have some self-acceptance, hopefully we'll get to a place of self-love with whoever you are, even if you don't change at all. To be able to be there and love yourself the way you are. Eventually. It's going to take time. We'll get there one day, Menachem Hashem. So let's talk about Chodesh Elul. It is Rosh Chodesh now. And it's another concept that's, when you hear that word, just to stop for a moment and see what comes up. And usually it's the ideas that we picked up from the past years. Very simple. If you grew up in a Hasidic family, you have one picture. Litvish family, Yeshivish family, if you're whatever, if your parents, how they took it, what were the messages they were giving you. So it's just a very important awareness. And if you're with us on this journey, that's the step number one, just to be aware of, there's no right or wrong as of now. No right or wrong. It is what comes up when you think about it. Not many people didn't show up tonight because they don't want to talk about it. And I could understand them. Many people don't want to talk about El. Maybe when it's Rosh Hashanah, they'll think about it for a few minutes. But now, why think about it? Why start so early? But if you're here and you're listening to me now, so if you're a part of our journey, so it might be a little bit easier, even if you do have some negativities, brings up things you don't like, but we're not scared. We can continue breathing. And we're learning how to be able to sit there and see what comes up. So let's stop for a moment just to be aware of what are the picture. What's the picture that comes up in your mind when you hear Chodesh Elul? And then maybe you can take it to the next step, see where it comes from. Who are the people in that picture? Just to see what's the feeling you get. And you let it come up. We're not scared. It's just a feeling. We can think about it. What are the messages we got when we were younger? Whatever comes up, just let it come up. You become aware of what it is. I know, again, some people have positive, some people have negative, some people don't want to talk about it. Some have a God that's looking to punish, and some have positive, it's full of abundance and thanking Hashem every day. And I wonder where you are. I would say I'm somewhere in between. I'm still working on it. I get both messages, so I'm still working on it. That's the little bit that I can share about myself. But just to see where you are, you might be in a very positive place, and this is something you're looking forward to the whole year, which is amazing. Or sometimes people are shut down. They're part of it, they do it, but they're not so much involved. And that's also a question, why not? It might be hard to be involved, so you might be shut down. And like we said, it's important to know what feelings come up, because that's what it boils down to. Like we discussed many times, it's that feeling that you get. How do you feel about it? So we do know that Chodesh Elul has very positive names. It is called Yimei Rachamim v'Haratzon. Now, if you think about it, it's beautiful. It should be beautiful. But if you're talking about forgiveness, when I say the word forgiveness, what comes to your mind then? What are the ideas that come into your mind? If you need to forgive somebody, if somebody has to forgive you, then automatically there's something negative there. You did something. But what are we focusing on? What are we feeling? What are we living with? So let's stop for a moment. If you want, you can type in the chat, what are some words of feelings? Let's talk about emotions that come up when you hear the word forgiveness. To forgive, what are some ideas that come straight into your mind? Whatever it is, positive or negative. Just like this. Okay, so what are some ideas? So you might ask, will Hashem forgive? Okay, that's an important awareness, just to see what your relationship is, what comes up. Some ideas come up that, like we're not sure if forgiveness will actually happen. And then again, there might be some experiences in your life that not always do people forgive. And that's how we look at Hashem. It's important awareness. And many people know of the positive. To be able to forgive, it's not the person that you're forgiving, it's really you to be able to let go, because if not, we hold the grudges in our head and we're walking around with it all day. So that's the positive side. But again, it's important to know if it's possible, if it's hard. Sometimes forgiving is not easy. So here are some emotions, negative emotions that people come up with when they hear the words forgiving. Forgiveness is fear, guilt, anger, sadness. So exactly, whatever the story was, everybody has their stories in their mind. And when something happened, then we have to forgive. There's so many negative emotions. But it doesn't have to be that way. There are some positive emotions to it. And some of the positives are to be in a peaceful place, whether you can forgive or others forgive you, to have some hope, gratitude, a positive relationship, love, relief. So, like we always mention, there is always both. The cup is always either half full or it's half full and half empty. You can choose what you want to focus on. So, obviously, forgiveness means something happened. And yes, maybe we did something wrong. But what's the relationship that we have with Hashem? If we can sit down and think about it, see, where am I? What am I doing? What can I change? What can I, small steps. But automatically, when you sit down in this space, if negativity comes up and it's full of negativity, you're not going to stay there for too long. And why would you want to think about it? But why don't we switch it back if it's Yemei Rachmim V'Aslichos? It's Yemei Rotzain. And think about it from a different lens. Not from the lens that we have. Think about it from Hashem's perspective. And don't put yourself in Hashem's place. Don't think that Hashem thinks the way you think. If he's, compassionate and understanding, and he's the one who runs the world. And another question is looking back, talking about Elul, Rosh Hashanah, people are scared. What's going to be? But let's look back on the year. Let's look back. Another awareness, what comes up? You can put it in the chat. What are things that come up looking back on the past year? What are some ideas that come up? Is it full of gratitude, abundance, thanking Hashem, feeling good about your growth, feeling good about yourself? Or maybe seeing all the pain, seeing negativity. There's so much going on in the world, which I'm not saying it's not. But again, there's both. There's always both. Where does your mind sit? Where do you sit? Are you sitting with the positives or with the negatives? So if you find yourself with a lot of negativity, we'll have to work on sitting with the positives. In the beginning, when we started, this whole Wednesday night, the idea was to slow down, to be able to be connected, be in a space where we don't have to run. And we came up with the idea that it's hard for many people because of negativity, the negativity that comes up. So we learn how to sit with the negatives, not to be scared with those negative emotions. There's only an emotion. You can sit there and still be there, become aware of it. But then after a while, if all you find is negatives, you have to build that positive bank account. You can't just walk around with negatives. You need to have a positive bank account. So again, we're still with the awareness. What are you sitting with? What comes up? And especially when it comes to Elul, it comes to connection with Hashem. Really, it's first looking at yourself. And it brings us back to what comes up. And become aware. If you're sitting with the positives, beautiful. Take it in. If you're sitting with the negatives, beautiful. Take it in. But not for too long. But if you can sit with it, most people can't sit with it. And that's why they're running. Very good question. Why are negative emotions much more powerful than positives? Why are negative emotions much more powerful than positives? The negatives go deep down. I've discussed it in the past. When we do have a positive situation, it hits us just for a second. Something works out. You were worried about something because that was a negative. You were nervous, and things it worked out. So Baruch Hashem, you thank Hashem, and then you're on to the next worry. So our mind is much more it's used to sitting with negatives, being worried, how's it going to work out, being anxious, and seeing negative, sitting with the negative, having these negative thoughts. In order to sit with positives, we have to actively make a decision that we're going to spend the next few minutes focusing on positive. And that's why to journal, to write down a few positive things that you're grateful for, it helps. And I've gotten feedback from many people. Just by spending a few minutes, in a way, in the beginning, they have to force themselves. Somebody asked me, okay, I'll write some positives, but can I write the negatives also? I said, yes, you can. It's hard for them to only write the positives. And then eventually, first they force themselves, but eventually it makes a change. It makes a change in a person's brain. So step number one for tonight, just the benefit of self-reflection, which most of you know already. Just looking back, if you were here for a few sessions, a few Wednesday nights, looking back on the change, on the positive changes that it has, by spending some time of sitting with yourself, even though some negatives come up. And obviously, we're going to talk about Elul, we'll talk about forgiveness. There are going to be some negatives. But if we can learn how to sit with it, eventually we become in control. I'm not running away from it. I'm aware of it. Now I can decide, what would I like to do? What could I do about it? And then we pick up some positives, and then you feel more confident. You start feeling confident about yourself. So just looking back, if you were with us on this journey, to spend some time thinking about yourself, some self-reflection, just to recognize your personal growth. This is all by stopping, being present, being aware, even though some negative things come up, but we're not scared. The problem is that many people will fall into a place where they sit with the negatives and can't get out, right? So they can't do some self-introspection, because the second they sit down talking about themselves is only negatives. So how do you avoid that? Right? What does it look like? People are harsh, and the voices in their head go over and over. And when they start thinking about themselves, they all these negative things are not working out. They have regrets and their anxiety, and then they fall into depression. It's not going anywhere. Why would you tell me to sit there? So that could happen for many who are not aware of how do you do this whole self-introspection, thinking about yourself, to criticize yourself, overthinking. So a few things that we mentioned in the past. First of all, we need the balance, like we mentioned. We need both. The bank account, you're going to have negatives, but you have to have positives. If you only see negatives, seek out for some help. Find somebody that can help you. It could be a good friend, and somebody that you feel positive when you're around them. And you ask them for some feedback. Give me some positive feedback on myself. Somebody can tell you, wow, the past half year, in the past year, look, when you did that, when you did this, it worked out, it was amazing. And you're going to hear that like, wow. Take it in, write it down. So you have to find ways how to, it might be in the beginning to force yourself. You're not going to believe it, but you have to find those ways to fill up that positive bank account. And one more technique, just an idea for tonight, is set a time. Don't sit for too long and try to figure this out, especially if you're a beginner. Sitting and thinking about yourself a few minutes a day. Set a timer, 5 minutes. When you finish, close and go on. And then you have to be able to see if you can do it. Some people walk around with the negativity all day. And what we want to do is contain it to a few minutes a day. That's it. The rest of your day, you should walk around happy, excited with what you're doing, even though it's not perfect. Yes, you are growing. And if you need some more positives, you can always reach out, even though I don't know you, but you can reach out to somebody. Everybody has positives. We all have positives. You just have to find it. And then you can walk around with the positives. A few minutes a day to see what's my thinking pattern. How do I think? What the way I look at myself? Is it negative? And many of you are aware, many of you are aware. I don't want to think, I think about myself all day and I'm always negative. Where's this going to go? Why should I do it? But this is basically what we're looking for, the balance, a few minutes a day, and acceptance, even if things that come up you don't like, to accept that. Like we discussed in the past, we're not perfect. That's right. It's okay. If you can do things different, you want to take something small, start very small, no problem. That's okay. But what's the feedback that you're getting? Is it working or not? So you can look from the past years. Some people try to do big things this year. What am I going to do? And maybe it works for a little bit, but it shows that you have that desire, but it doesn't last too long. We have to learn how to figure out it should work, and we should feel it's working. We should feel we're on the journey, we're taking a step, and we can look down the ladder and see, wow, look at that. Even though when you look up, looks like you have a long way to go, but start looking down. If you see yourself only on that first step, you might have to reach out to be able to see that you have much more than that. So that's it for tonight. Just the awareness. Why it is important to stop for a few minutes. Why there is so much positivity to it. And if you only find negative, we need the balance. It should be just a few minutes a day. And that's it for tonight. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. When you have questions that come up during the week, you're on this journey, you're taking some time off, and you start your journaling, and some feelings come up, you can always send me an email, coachmenachem@gmail.com, and we'll see what we can do about it. Just so you have somebody to, just send it out there. It might help. Sorry. So here's some questions. So I'm not going to go into that. They call it Jewish guilt. A lot of people feel alive. They feel that Hashem is going to accept them when they feel that guilt. So it's that guilty feeling, and they feel good with it. It's like, oh, this is what we need, I have to feel guilty. So you might say, I want to sit in the positives. Yeah, I mean in the negatives. Let me sit in it because that's what gives me life. Okay, it's something to think about. Are there any positive feelings that we can put in there? Only guilt, only feeling bad about yourself. That's an important piece. What happens if depression comes up? If loneliness comes up? You're sitting down, you're doing some of the work, sitting down with yourself. This is a great question. I'm going to talk about it for a minute, but it could take, there's a lot to it. We discussed it on one of our Sunday night program with the Promans. We were born by ourselves. And no matter where we are, no matter how many friends we have, and no matter how connected we are, we always have some place where you're going to feel lonely. It's an interesting concept. And then you can connect to Hashem because we are part of Hashem. But it's that feeling of loneliness. You are by yourself. You are who you are, and you're not with somebody else. You might have friends, you might have people that you can distract, you can feel comfortable with, you can get support, which is amazing. But then you go home. You might have, your family support. But again, we are born by ourselves. So there is that little bit of loneliness that we all have. That's what I believe. You can send me an email if you think different. But the question is how lonely, how depressed. So that could be a question. If it's too much, then you might have to look out for some help, get support, whatever it is. Whatever it is, don't do it by yourself. Don't try to figure it out on your own. But that little bit of loneliness, it really is, that's a place where that vulnerability. And when you get to that place, in a way, you can connect to yourself. That's a real connection. That loneliness feeling, and then you can be there for yourself. You can take care of yourself. Say, what do I need now? Why do I feel this way now? What am I missing? You can listen to yourself as a good friend. But that's when you connect with yourself. That's that deep, real self, that you can be there for yourself. But again, if it's too long, if you feel yourself walking around all day with it, reach out for help. But there's something very deep to it. And if you've gotten to that place from a positive place, you're doing some meditation, you're relaxing, you're taking it easy, you feel you're more in control, you're working on your positivity. Sometimes that negative, not negative, that loneliness comes in. And just think, what are the thoughts? What are those thoughts that make you feel lonely? Like, what are you missing? What would you want things to be different? And then you can be there for yourself and say, you know, what can I do? That's where self-care comes in. We all have to learn. You can look in the past Wednesday nights, we've had a few on self-care. We need to learn how to take care of ourselves because we need it. And we need somebody to be there for ourselves. And many people struggle with that. And even if they know of the concept of self-care, but they don't actually do it, like I mentioned many times, go get yourself a coffee if that's what you like. Somebody might say, have a coffee every morning. Why is that self-care? So you know what? Tomorrow morning, when you drink your coffee, think about it and think that you're giving it to yourself. Don't just drinking because drink every day. You're not thinking, you're busy with what am I going to do today. Spend 2 minutes, sit down and enjoy the coffee. Thank you very much for joining. That's it for tonight. Any questions, you can send coachmenachem@gmail.com. Let me know how your journey is going. We'll see you next week, Wednesday night, in Menachem. Same place. And have a good night and a good week.